And joining us from Brussels, Belgium, Patsy Widakuswara. She is the senior White House correspondent and traveling with President Biden. Hello, Patsy. These types of international summit feel so far removed from the lives of ordinary people. Please tell us, what are the decisions actually made during the G7 summit that can have impact on ordinary Indonesian people and others around the world?
Well, you're absolutely right, Fifi. I mean, these international summits are often called a diplomat's tea party, as you know. And we really have to ask, what are the commitments made by the G7 leaders that will actually translate to real life differences in people's life? But as you know, this is a grouping of 7 of the wealthiest democracies. So a lot of their decisions will impact the rest of the world economically as well as politically. Now, 2 of the things that I can underline from this summit is the first one is their commitment to end the pandemic and prevent a future one. You've seen in my report that the leaders have agreed to donate 1 billion doses. That's whether in the form of actual vaccine doses or in terms of contribution to COVAX. This is the UN mechanism of vaccine sharing to ensure that low and medium income countries, including Indonesia, have access to vaccines. And 500 million of those vaccine doses will be contributed by the United States, again, via the COVAX scheme. 92 countries, including Indonesia, will be part of it. So we don't know how many actual doses will translate to doses given to Indonesia. That's still being determined. But that's definitely one thing to be underlined. And the second one is climate change. I mean, these are the leaders of the wealthiest nations. They're industrialized. A lot of their actions will determine how much greenhouse gases gets emitted to the atmosphere, as well as what kind of commitments they and their private sector will do to reduce the increase of Earth's temperature to under 1.5 degrees Celsius as they head to the next big summit on climate change, which is the COP26 in a few months in Glasgow. So those are the 2 things, climate change and also COVID, that I would say would make a difference if the countries actually do what they pledged to do at the G7 summit.
Now, Patsy, many activists are saying that the 1 billion doses of vaccine donation from G7 countries is not enough. They should instead waive trademark restrictions so that developing countries can produce their own. So tell us more, why doesn't the G7 support the idea of developing countries produce their own vaccines?
You're absolutely right, Ralph. I mean, the UN has said that we need at least 11 billion doses of vaccine to reach herd immunity to get the world out of this pandemic. So 1 billion doses is, it's a start, but it's definitely nowhere enough to get us out of it. And there is a lot of pressure for these wealthy countries to do more, certainly. And the thing about waiving vaccine patent is this all comes down to this proposal originally submitted by South Africa as well as India at the World Trade Center, where they're saying, look, we don't need vaccine donations. Countries like South Africa and India and many other middle-income countries, including Indonesia, we can actually make our own vaccines. We don't want to be begging for doses. Just give us the recipe and tell us that if we produce these vaccines, your pharmaceutical companies won't be suing us for intellectual property infringement. So this is the kind of debate that's going on at the G7, and there are 2 camps, as I noted in my report. There's the there's the US under President Biden, as well as France under President Macron, who agreed to support this TRIPS waiver, that is the proposal at the WTO to waive patents on vaccine technology, and the rest of the G7 who says, no, we don't want to do that. What we want to do is voluntary licensing. This is the kind of licensing, for example, between Sinovac and Biopharma in Indonesia that enables companies in different countries to produce it. However, it's still very much determined by the original maker of the vaccine. What is the timeline, how much to produce, and how much to sell, what the pricing to sell. So it's definitely not, it's more restrictive than waiving patents on the vaccines. So far, the G7 has said that's the way we want to do it. We're not going to give away our vaccine recipes. I think this debate will continue to, develop at the World Trade Center, and the U.S. has promised that it will not change its position in terms of actually supporting the vaccine patent waiver.
All right, then. Well, I'd like to move on to China. Tell us more about this focus on China. What was the message that the G7 leaders are trying to convey to Xi Jinping? And Is there a unified response from the G7 leaders, Patsy?
Yeah, so the message that the G7 leaders are trying to convey to President Xi Jinping is, number one, we know that you're rising, and we know that you are playing in some ways not according to international rules when it comes to trade. And we also are watching you in terms of human rights abuses. The thing that they're really underlying right now is the use of forced labor. This is the accusation that Beijing is doing this mass transfer of millions of Uyghur ethnic minorities, Muslim ethnic minorities, as well as other ethnic minorities from the region of Xinjiang to factories all over China, producing global brands, technology, consumer goods, all sorts of things. And this is the reason why China can compete so well around the world, is because they're using this type of forced labor, obviously pressing down on their costs. And so this is something that the President Biden and G7 leaders want to highlight, not just in terms of the humanitarian aspect of it, but also on the trade impact of it. So that's number one. Number two, the leaders of the G7 are saying to China that, look, we know that you are offering all these hundreds of billions of loans, in some ways with very questionable requirements to countries around Africa, Southeast Asia, as well as Latin America, even in Europe, in the form of the Belt and Road Initiative loans. What the G7 leaders, with the push from President Joe Biden, is saying that this is what we can offer as an alternative, this new initiative called Build Back Better World. What is still unclear, PP, is just how much new funding is actually allocated by the leaders. Is this just a repackaging of already existing loans from IMF and the World Bank and Exim Bank and so on? What is the timeline? What is the scope? That much is still really unclear.
All right. So, Patsy, you're now in Brussels covering President Biden, who is there for the NATO and EU summit. So tell us what's on the agenda. What can we expect looking ahead this week?
Yep, I am in the very exciting environment of the Press Filing Center here at the hotel in Brussels. Right after this, I'm going to wrap up and go to the NATO headquarters, where President Biden will be meeting with President Erdogan of Turkey in a couple of hours. He just recently met with NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, and I think he's meeting with some Balkan leaders right now as we speak. Later on, there will be a press conference where Joe Biden will again underline the message that America is back. Obviously, this is a not subtle jab against his predecessor, President Trump, who was very much viewing alliances in Europe with a lot of disdain. You remember that President Trump said that NATO was obsolete at one point. So this is definitely a change of tone that President Biden will be bringing in Europe. Tomorrow, we'll be heading to Geneva. On Wednesday, actually, we'll be heading to Geneva after today's NATO summit, and tomorrow a summit with the EU. On Wednesday, we'll be heading to Geneva, where there'll be this long-awaited summit between President Biden and President of Russia, Vladimir Putin. A lot of issues will be discussed, including what the Russian interference or Russian meddling on U.S. elections, as well as democratic elections around the world, as well as issues of cybersecurity and ransomware, but also areas of cooperation, including reduction of nuclear arms and climate change. So a big, busy week for Joe Biden, and I'll be followed. And I'm happy to report back to you guys whenever you need.
Very well then. Patsy Widakuswara, Senior White House Correspondent, thank you for joining us. You stay safe. Take care.